All right. So right here, this is what you need to be looking at. This is talking about evaluating functions. Okay, when you are evaluating functions, we're going to be practicing with using what's called function notation. Okay, function notation has this f parentheses x. That f parentheses x right here, what that stands for, well, the way you say it is f of x. F of x equals 2x minus 1. You're going to be able to, you're going to be asked to evaluate functions given an example like f of 3. When the number is inside the parentheses, you are being given the x value. Because inside the parentheses, it says f of x, and if the number's inside there, that's the x value. When they give you that, that is helping you find, you can use that number to find the y value. You should have this written down on your paper. The next thing it says, you are also going to be given things where it says f of x equals 5. Guys, that's the same as saying y equals 5. F of x equals and y equals mean the same thing. When a number is set equal to f of x, then you are being given the y value so that you can find the x value. Make sure you have that written down. I'm going to move mine down here in just a second for us to practice. All right, looking here. We're going to use the idea of f of x, h of x, the functions, to be able to find our answers. So when this says x equals -3, this could be written the same as f of -3. So when they're giving us our x value, it can also be written f of -3. What that is saying is, it's saying that when my x number is -3, what is my y value? Well, look over here in the table. When your x number is -3, what is your y value? Right across here, it says 0. And so I've got y equals 0. And I'm going to back up a second because this actually, in the table, they're not using f of x, they're using h of x, which it doesn't matter what letter you use out here. So this is going to be h of -3. So y equals 0, that's the same as saying, ooh, let me see if I can write this. Maybe if I can erase. That's the same as saying h of x equals 0. These two things mean the same thing. Y equals 0 and h of x equals 0. So let's go back over here and let's look at the next one. The next one says x of 1. Well, how do I write x of 1 with function notation? You're going to write h of, and you're going to put that number inside the parentheses, h of 1. So it's asking you, when your x value is 1, what is your y value? Oh, there we go. Here's my x number of 1. What's my y value? My y value is 12. Y equals 12. Another way of writing it instead of y equals is not f, try h, come on Crawford, h of x equals 12. Again, these two things mean the same thing. All right, so if we flip things around, well, no, I guess the next one, try number 3. Number 3 is the way we just did it. I want you to write it in function notation, and then I want you to find the y value. So what I'm asking you to do here, x equals 0. That's the same as h of 0. H of 0. Well, look here where the X number is 0. What's my answer? What's my Y value? My Y value is 6. So I get Y equals 6. Well, the other way to write this so that it's in function notation is f of x equals 6. Again, these two things mean the same. All right, so the next one, this time it says h of x equals 0. H of x equals 0. Remember, that is the same as saying y equals 0. So let's go into the h of x column right here and find where my y number is 0. In this case, I find 2 spots where there's 0. And that's fine. We can have 2 answers. My answers are going to be the x numbers. I get x equals -3 and x equals -2. Both of these are my answers because I'm looking to see where h of x equals 0. All right, make sure you have that written down. I'm going to move my paper up and we're going to go to the next section. So as we go here, this time it's asking us to evaluate and it's giving us an equation. So it's giving us f of x equals 8 minus 4x. It's saying what is f of 7? That's saying when x is 7, what is y? So I'm going to rewrite my equation. Now, instead of f of x, I'm going to write y equals 8 minus 4x. So let me write that down here. Y equals 8 minus 4x. Now, it is giving us the x value. So, I don't want to do that. Instead of x, I'm going to put in the parentheses there, I'm going to put the 7 in there because I'm substituting it. Well, now we can put in our calculator right here, put 8 minus 4 times 7. And again, you should be using your Desmos calculator in order to do that. Or you can just use on your phone, you can use that calculator. So you have 8 minus 28, which gives me, so I have y equals -20. Which also can be written as f of x equals -20. Remember, I said y equals and f of x means the same thing. And here will be our answer. So now, take a minute and try and do the letter B, doing the same thing. It says f of 0. Remember, you're starting off with your same equation, y equals 8 minus 4x. It's saying f of 0. That is giving me my x value. So I'm going to rewrite this, y equals 8 minus 4 times 0. I'm going to put 0 in there. Now, evaluate this, simplify this. Well, y equals, when you put 8 minus 4 times 0 in the calculator, you're going to get 8. The other way to write that instead of y equals is f of x equals 8. Here is your answer. So now, what do we do when we go back and we have f of x equals? It's giving us the y value. When it says f of x equals, that's the same as y equals 24. Well, I'm going to write my function f of x equals 8 minus 4x. So it's saying f of x is 24. So let me get rid of the f of x. I'm going to put the 24 in there. Now, once I substitute that in, now I'm going to solve for x. Let me get x by itself. So I'm going to subtract 8 from each side. 24 divided by 8, or 24 minus 8, sorry, is 16, equals, these cancel, negative 4x. Then when I divide by negative 4, I get my answer to be x equals negative 4. Now, you can do this by hand, or if you remember how to put it in the calculator, the other lessons when we practiced on how to put it in the Desmos calculator to solve your equations, that'd be the easiest way to do it. We'll go back and we'll review over that in a little bit. So go ahead and try and set up letter D the same way I just did mine. Remember, you have f of x equals 8 minus 4x. It's giving us f of x. It's giving us f of x. So I'm going to take that 32 and I'm going to put it in here where the f of x is. So instead of f of x, I'm going to put 32 in here. Now, from here, I'm going to subtract 8 from each side. And I'm going to get 24 equals negative 4x. Then I need to divide by negative 4. Okay, so what I'm finding out, there's some lag up here on the screen here in class. You may need to go ahead and get onto the Google Meets so that you can see my screen, because something's happening with the internet here. But this way, if you're in the Google Meets, you can watch the lesson. And now I have, and do it with us, we have x equals negative 6. That's what our answer is supposed to be. So again, those of you that are here in class, go and get onto the Google Meets so that you can see it. And then I'm going to move this up and we're going to practice on domain and range. Those of you that are at home, remember we have paper copies of the assignments. They are in the front office so that you can pick up if you want to use them at home instead of having to write it on a sheet of paper. So those of you in class, make sure you just mute. Okay, come on, machine. Hold on, I'm having a glitch here. Let's see if I can get this figured out. All right, so now we should have this in front of us. We have a word problem, and the first thing it's asking us to do is to figure out what is the domain and range of this situation. One of the things we've talked about is I want us to remember that I've always talked about doctor. I don't want to write it over here. Let's see, I'm right over here. Doctor XY. We've done these other lessons. I've talked about Dr. XY. That is helping me know that domain is the X, range is the Y. Okay, so let's label our axis. We've got X and we've got Y. One of the things we are missing here is we need to write on our paper, this is down here is number of minutes. That got cut off on the graph for some reason. So label that as number of minutes. Anytime you see the words domain and range, wherever I see domain, I want you to put an X above it. Wherever you see range, I want you to put a Y above it. We need to get in the habit of that so that we can remember. So right here on the X-axis, that's going to be what my domain is. So when it wants it in words, my domain, let's see if I can spell. Domain is going to be the number of minutes. Then my range is what's on the y-axis. And so my range is going to be my heart rate. Okay, so we have domain and range. Now I'm going to zoom this out, but the next question says, would this graph of the situation be continuous or discrete? So as I make this a little bit something we can see, let me move this up. All right. Continuous and discrete. Move this over, see if I can find something I like. When something is discrete, when it is discrete, it is specific values. It can only be certain numbers. If we're talking about people, just because you're short doesn't make you a half of a person. You're either going to have 1, 2, or 3 people. Okay. When it's continuous, I'm sorry. And then the other thing I want to say is when it's discrete on a graph, we're going to have dots. So remember, D for discrete, D for dots. When something is continuous, this is going to have a line for the graph. It doesn't mean it goes on forever. It means between 2 points, it's every number between 2 points. It's all numbers between 2 points. So when I look at this graph, first off, I see a line. That's going to tell me right now and give me a hint that it's going to be continuous. But let's talk about why it's continuous. You're talking about heart rate. Can you go and just have a heart rate of 100 and then it automatically goes to 140? It doesn't just jump up and down automatically. Your heart rate has to gradually increase. Okay, it doesn't just go from one number to the next. It may seem like it sometimes, especially if you get scared at a haunted house and it feels like you're going to have a heart attack, but it gradually increases or gradually decreases. So we're going to say here it is continuous. Okay, so it is continuous. I'm trying to write on my board here because your heartbeats at all times and normally doesn't stop unless you're having a heart attack or you're dead. Okay, so your heart has to beat at all times. It's going through all the time, 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, it's going to keep beating. Now, here's the biggest thing. It wants us to write in inequality notation, what is my domain and my range? Well, so this is where you're going to have to identify these on tests. Remember, where we see domain, please put an X on your paper. Where you see range, put a Y. Domain is from left to right. So I normally go with a highlighter. You're going to want to highlight or box in with your pencil from left to right of the function. Not of what your graph is, but where your function is. And now we have to say, okay, well, what does it go between? Well, it starts down here at 0 and it goes out here to 32. Okay, it's not because of what the grid goes to, but where the actual function is stopping at. So you're going to write 0 less than or equal to X less than or equal to 32. This is your domain. Okay, this is your domain. Again, this is what we were working on last week. And if you didn't do those or you weren't here, those videos and everything are posted. The whole lesson is posted on last week's parts in the Google Classroom. Then your range. Your range are going to be your y values, and that goes from the bottom to the top. So the lowest I'm going to go down is here. I'm going to box in from the bottom and then to the top of the function. And as I look at this, what is the lowest this thing goes to? The lowest it comes down here to is 120. The highest it goes up here to, across here, ends up being around, and we're going to make an estimate, it's around 148. Anything around 145 I would take as an answer, because on a multiple choice test, they'll have something around in that area. So it'll be 120 less than or equal to y, less than or equal to 148. And again, the 148 is an estimate. The very last thing it asks you is, why is your heart rate only positive numbers? Why do you only have positive numbers for your x and your y values? Well, your x values is talking about number of minutes. Can we talk about, is there anything like -2 minutes, -10 minutes? No. What about heartbeats? If you have -2 heartbeats, that's not even possible, because if you're not alive, you have 0 heartbeats. You can't go into the negatives. So what we're going to write here, let me move this up. What we're going to write here is you can't have a negative number of minutes and heartbeats, just for the reasons that we just talked about. If you have negative heartbeats, you're not alive. And there's not negative minutes. So now I'm going to move my paper here in just a second. Those of you with the papers, let's look at number 2. And even at home, you can look at the papers that are on the Google Classroom. Again, I want to remind you that starting yesterday, I put those packets at the front office where you somebody can swing by and pick them up so that you actually can have the copies. All right, here's the next one. Here's my graph, and it says, in words, describe the domain and the range. Okay, y'all, I need you to go above domain and range right now. Domain is X, range is Y. Remember, Dr. XY. Domain, oh, don't come back here. There we go. Dr. XY, domain range. Domain is X, range is Y. So I'm going to label my graph. I've got my X-axis and my Y-axis. Remember, my X is my domain. My Y-axis is my range. So when it asks you to describe the domain and range in words, I am writing that my domain, if I can get this here, is height in inches. How do I know that? Because that's what's labeled right here on the X-axis. My range is the area in square inches. Well, that's because that's what's labeled on my Y-axis right there. Now, I'll move it up. I'll kind of squish it together. And the next question is asking us, is our situation continuous or discrete? Remember, we just talked about continuous being a line, discrete being dots. Discrete is dots because it is specific values. Well, what do you see on our graph? Well, I see it's a line. So this means that I am going, oh, I don't want to do that. Let's see. It's going to be continuous. Okay. So it's continuous. It's continuous since you can have, since you can have something that is, for example, 1.111 inches according to the graph. Okay, so when you're measuring something in height, I mean, we can have any number when you're talking about height, because as people grow and or you cut things, it can be any length and any width. So now down below, again, it talks about representing your inequality, your domain and range and inequality with inequality notation. All right. So, sorry, I was trying to move that. So I have domain is X, range is Y. Now, I'm going to go and I'm going to box that in. To find my domain, remember my domain goes from left to right. So if I box it in from the very left to the very right, and again, I would use highlighters at home on my paper to help me see that. It is going from 0, and it looks like it's out here at about 6.5. Now, anything a little bit bigger than 6 would be fine. So for my domain, I'm going to write 0 less than or equal to X less than or equal to 6.5. Now my range. My range goes from the bottom to the top. It's not the top of the graph, but of the data, and it happens to be at the top of the graph, but it's going from 0 up here to 10. So I'm going to write 0 less than or equal to Y less than or equal to 10. Make sure you have that down. Now, the last question asks you, as the domain increases, what happens to the range and why does this happen? Well, so domain is your X. So from left to right, as this is going up. Okay, so from left to right, it's going up. As my X numbers increase, what happens to this graph with the Y numbers? The Y numbers go up higher and higher. So what we're going to write down here, let's see if I can move this up. The range increases. The range increases. Okay, so as the domain, increases, the range increases. This happens because as the height increases, it will cause the entire area to increase. Let me give you a second to write that down.